What is going on, Notre Dame fans? Mike's here and Kyle Kelly from the Blue and Gold YouTube channel talking about Notre Dame hosting Indiana in the 7-10 game. We will get the full bracket up in just a second, and it looks like we already have it. So here it is, folks. Oregon gets the 1 seed. Georgia's in the 2. Boise over Arizona State in terms of the 3 and the 4. And then in the 7-10 game, Notre Dame will host Indiana. So much to discuss, everyone. I actually tweeted late last night after the game. I was like, no idea how the committee will view Notre Dame versus Penn State and Texas. My guess, Notre Dame 7 against SMU or Indiana. That ended up being pretty accurate here. So Notre Dame will have a Hoosier State battle against the Hoosiers. Then the 6-11 Penn State will host SMU. So the committee goes with SMU over Alabama. Ohio State and Tennessee and the 8-9. Volunteers will head to Columbus. And then the 5-12 game, you have Texas hosting Clemson. Fascinating stuff. Let's just go to Kyle. This was the big discussion going into today. Is Notre Dame going to be in the 5, the 6, or the 7? How does the committee see Notre Dame? And I didn't really see the 6. I thought it was going to be the 5 or the 7. How much was the committee going to value those conference championship game losses, with Texas losing slightly, against Georgia, and Penn State putting up a good showing? I mean, losing for the game, or all the game, I believe. I don't think they had a lead at all, but losing by 8 against clearly the best team in the country this year. I don't know if Oregon will win the Natty, but clearly the best team in the country. They didn't knock those two teams really for conference championship game losses, in which they had decent showings, and Notre Dame there in the 7. Kyle, what's your reaction?
Well, Mike, this is what I said last night. I'm going to share my screen here from the loose emoji message board, how I projected things to play out, and it was pretty much accurate. I called Notre Dame number 7 versus Indiana. And if you look at my projection on the loose emoji message board, basically my analysis was that when you look at the comments that Ward Manuel made last Tuesday when discussing the, how they ranked the teams last time around, basically what he said, if you're not playing a game, they're not going to penalize you in the rankings. So I kind of also perceive that as they're not going to punish teams for playing in their conference championship games. And I think that's exactly how the rankings fell out today, where basically everything remained the same, with towards the top. Boise State remained number 3, Arizona number 4, Texas stayed ahead of Penn State, and then Notre Dame stayed behind Texas and Penn State. And Notre Dame remained ahead of Ohio State. So this is basically summarizing. This is how I expected it to play out. I think this is a good matchup for Notre Dame, playing Indiana, the 7 versus 10. And how can you not look ahead to see if Notre Dame wins? I think they play Georgia in what would be the Sugar Bowl. So not a whole lot of surprises on my end today, because this is pretty much how I expected things to play out.
Yeah. Remains absolutely fascinating. Definitely will be looking in the chat for reaction. Someone just said IU open as a favorite.
No way.
Yeah. Are you looking at that wrong? Yeah, Left Twick says Notre Dame's favored by 4. We'll certainly get you guys that, as I am trying to post this update on our Instagram page, but sometimes Instagram's absolutely bugged. So let's maybe take a look real quick at the Hoosiers. Man, what I was actually messaging with, Jack Sobel, and I know you were on that text chain, Kyle. Like, there is 3 teams, in my opinion, that have like really strong resumes. Oregon, obviously, Georgia, and Boise. Those are the 3. Everyone else just has such flawed, like, the losses. You either have really bad losses or no good wins, really. And when it comes to Indiana, their marquee win is at home against Michigan? Is it at you? Like, what is it? I mean, beating Washington by a couple of touchdowns. What is their marquee win? Chat, tell me. I don't know. So I'm not scared of Indiana at all. It's in Notre Dame. Yes, you guys know how I feel. I wanted Notre Dame against like a Tennessee or Ohio. I wanted Notre Dame, but you guys know my dream matchup was Notre Dame Bama. I'm fine with this, obviously, but I wanted Notre Dame and Bama. But what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? So, Kyle, do you have many thoughts on Indiana before we bring in Jack Sobel?
I don't think it's more so the when you look at Indiana resume that makes it attractive. I don't think it's like a quality win. I think that it's the number of wins that they have and how they won those games. They looked impressive in a lot of those wins. Obviously, they're a one-loss team. Played Ohio State pretty tough for a half down there in Columbus on the road. First-year head coach Kurt Signetti. They've pretty much been one of the stories of college football this year. So, I mean, no surprise where they're seated as of me, kind of giving my explanation at the beginning of the show, kind of how I thought things would shake out. So I'm really curious to hear Jack Sobel's thoughts, though.
Yeah, you do bring up the good point on it's the amount of wins, right? And if it were so easy, then why don't more teams go 11-1? I definitely hear that, but Indiana, did they deserve to get in? I guess. Like, who are you going to bump? Like I said, it was such a wild college football season, and there was not like that many. Just like, yeah, that's a team that I absolutely, love their resume, everything they did. Like, there just wasn't. There's so many flawed teams because they just beat up each other. Bad losses like Ohio State and Michigan. We don't need to talk about Notre Dame. And So my point being, like, who are you going to bump it like an Indiana out for? Like, I'm not like Alabama. Sorry, no way. Bring in Jack Sobel, Blue and Gold beat writer. Jack, reaction to this college football playoff bracket?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I said like last night that on our board that Notre Dame could be seeded anywhere from 5 to 7, and you wouldn't be wrong. I think last night kind of left us with the most uncertain scenario with Texas losing to Georgia in a close game and Penn State competing with Oregon better than I personally thought they would. So I don't blame the committee for keeping Texas and Penn State above Notre Dame. Indiana's a fun matchup. I think they're a very well-coached team. They made some uncharacteristic mistakes on their punt team against Ohio State. I watched the majority of that game. They had their punter dropped a punt that basically gave Ohio State a free touchdown at the end of the first half. They allowed a return touchdown to Caleb Downs, who's obviously a fantastic football player. But like you guys said earlier, like, it's hard to win the rest of your games, even if you have a low-ranked schedule. Like Indiana, not only won, but they killed teams. Like a lot of the case for Indiana is similar to the case for Notre Dame, because while Notre Dame has better wins in A&M and probably USC too, but I mean both these teams just massacred everyone they played. I mean, what you guys probably saw what Indiana did to Purdue was very similar to what Notre Dame did to Purdue at the end of the season. And I like the matchup. Indiana's got a lot of good players that I'm going to be looking forward to breaking down in the next couple weeks.
All right, I'm going to trust that Jason is accurate here. Texas is a 14.5 point favorite over Clemson. Ohio State 6 point favorite over Tennessee. Penn State -9, SMU, and then Notre Dame 8.5 with Indiana. Obviously, if these are opening lines, they're going to shift a lot. Just scrolling Twitter, Joel Klatt is going, and he makes a good point. Joel says, what a horrendous job the committee did. The team that was penalized the most was Oregon, and the team that was rewarded was Penn State. I guess the Ducks should have laid down in the fourth. Atrocious. What? And his point being that Oregon, in their first game, plays Ohio State or Tennessee. Penn State gets SMU and then Boise. I don't think this is the committee. Like, the committee's job is to rank the teams, and the seeds are what the seeds are. Like, right. They're not picking seeds. Or at least I hope not. They're not picking seeds. They're picking rankings. So Joel is wrong with that. The problem is the automatic buys. There should not be automatic buys. I'm fine with the highest ranked 5 conference champs get in, but they should not get automatic buys. That is a problem. I don't know when it's moving to 16 or whatever. Kyle, do you agree with me? Like that's the problem here. Boise and Arizona State shouldn't be getting bye weeks. That's just, I think it's that simple.
Interesting, because Jack Swarbrick, he was the architect of this, college football playoff. So then that presents a scenario of Notre Dame, if they become a top 4 team in the playoff rankings, they basically get another bye in addition to the college, being not playing on a conference championship weekend and then not playing in the first round.
Yeah.
And not to shift the conversation too much, Mike, but I think I have to do it. How about the college football rankings leaving Notre Dame out of the top 4? Whereas if this was a 14 playoff, Notre Dame would have been left out.
So it would have just been the 4 highest ranked teams, right? That's all it would have been, which is Oregon, Georgia, Texas, Penn State? Is that it?
I think so.
Yeah. Oregon, Georgia, Texas, Penn State. Yeah, so it's just the SEC, Big Ten, and Invitational there. So yeah, that is interesting. But you do this is the thing about committees, right? You have this BCS formula. It's like, man, I hate computers. Let's get real people in there talking football. And then you have this. It's like, man, I want computers again, because if it were a 14 playoff, I bet you they would have done it differently, and they would have put Notre Dame in over Penn State. I bet you.
Oh, that's a hot take.
I don't disagree with that. I think so when I said I don't blame the committee for keeping Notre Dame behind Penn State and Texas, that's with the fact in mind that Penn State was ranked above Notre Dame before last night. I personally would have had Notre Dame ranked above Penn State after last night, before last night, because Notre Dame has better wins. Notre Dame has a win at Texas A&M and a more impressive win at USC than Penn State had. Obviously, Penn State has the much better loss, but I think quality wins should have mattered more than they did. Quality wins in the eye test should have mattered more than it did with Notre Dame and Penn State. But like you guys said, if it was the 14 playoff, we'd be talking a lot more about this. But now, I mean, yes, Notre Dame has a more difficult second round matchup. If they get by Indiana, which is by no means a guarantee, but they would also avoid Oregon, Ohio State, and Tennessee until the championship game, as I think a poster on the Loose Emoji board pointed out last night.
Folks, please hit the thumbs up on this video for to support what we're doing here at Blue and Gold. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, of course, for more content. Kyle, real quick, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say, here's the thing. Hasn't the committee pretty much showed us, from the first rankings reveal till now, that they value Penn State's resume higher than Notre Dame? And basically, with the way rankings fell out, and I said this at the start of the show, they're showing that they're not going to penalize teams for playing in a conference championship game.
Correct. No, I completely agree.
But we didn't see one of those 2 teams get smacked. Now, if Penn State would have got smacked, or maybe it's a different story, but you keep it within a score against Oregon, who has beaten Ohio State, now beaten Penn State, beat Boise. I was okay with it. I was okay with it. I mean, you look at the bracketology that Andy Staples and Ari Wasserman did. They had Penn State at 9.
I was listening to their show, and I don't know what their thinking was here. I mean, they clarified their thing.
They did, yeah. So they were like, listen, even though they said Ohio State won't move past Notre Dame, we still think they will anyways, which is, to me, that's funny. I took the committees, for their word. Man, there's so much to unpack here. But first, folks, we're going to talk about Rhoback. So if you go to rhoback.com, this will pop up. Save 15% off your first order. Well, with code BLUEGOLD20, we're giving you 5 extra percent there. So use the code BLUEGOLD20 on rhoback.com for a generous 20% off all new customers. That's RHOBACK.com. 20% off all performance polos, shirts, and more with code BLUEGOLD20. Your boy is rocking, what do they call this? The Fighting Irish. I mean, I wear this thing as much as I possibly can. Rhoback is absolutely incredible, folks. They are completely changing the game with their incredible, comfortable active wear. They have a licensed game day collection that's incredible. Folks watching on YouTube can see it. novel polo designs, clean hoodie, and Q-zip designs for your Notre Dame Fighting Irish and many other schools out there. It's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else on the market is pairing these levels of custom design with this quality of activewear. Roback's everyday shorts are the perfect pairing as well. Very comfortable, elastic waistband, great fabric that is made to have the design, the appearance of a nice short, but the comforts of an athletic short. Roback's been proudly leading the NIL charge, especially when it comes to Notre Dame, with past stars like Audric Esme, Kyle Hamilton, and Michael Mayer, and current athletes Riley Leonard and Ben Morrison. Roback is the go-to brand for college athletes. Folks, again, Blue Gold 20 on roback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers. Okay, Brian Kelly's accent just said, when are they releasing the date and time? I'm going to trust that one of you two are kind of scrolling Twitter when we're yapping. Yeah. I don't know if that's come out yet. I don't think so, Jack.
It's actually out. I have it on my TV. It is it's the Friday night game, December 20th in South Bend.
Tim Hyde's been calling it. Tim Hyde has been calling it for months.
Friday Jack, Night Lights in the Hoosier State, baby.
Jack, I don't know if you want to update your story with that. Yeah. You can hop off for a minute if you need to. But okay, so Notre Dame
put me in the backstage.
Yep, got you, brother. And as soon as we get a tweet, I'm sure that will be fired out, and we'll discuss that shortly. It's just for folks watching this back on YouTube or listening to the podcast. We went live within a minute of this being announced, by the way. So this is very live reaction. So I had a few comments queued up. Don't blame me before the rankings came out. It said Notre Dame 6, Penn State will be 5, or Texas will be 5, Penn State 7. Don't blame me. I'm blaming you. You were wrong. Miguel Garcia, appreciate the $5 super chat. He says, as someone who grew up in Georgia, followed IU basketball and a Notre Dame grad, this will be tense for me. So Notre Dame's reward for potentially beating Indiana will be Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, which will obviously be fascinating. And then, but if you beat Georgia there, what, you're playing a Boise or Penn State? Like the path for Notre Dame to this national championship is not bad. It's not. Georgia's going to be tough, but you guys know my stance on this. I've wanted Notre Dame in the first round to get one of these big boys. They're not. Indiana, no disrespect to Indiana, but just if this ain't basketball, like I wanted them right away to get that marquee win. Hey, beat Indiana and then go get it against Georgia. Kyle.
Well, I just looking at the rankings, I can't stop but keep thinking about how last night's games were probably the worst outcome for Notre Dame with with Oregon, beating Penn State, and then obviously Georgia winning in overtime. I think you really wanted to see Texas beat Georgia, and then obviously you wanted to see Oregon beat Penn State pretty bad, because I think the 5 or the 6 seed is probably the most desirable route.
Yeah.
And I know Georgia hasn't looked great at times this year. Georgia Tech gave them a hell of an effort. What was that game? 6-7 overtimes with Haynes King and Georgia Tech. That was a hell of a ball game. But we're talking about a Georgia team that's got, multiple championship pedigree, extremely talented roster. We don't know what their, quarterback situation is going to look like. But you're looking at the Bulldogs potentially being Notre Dame's next opponent. Obviously Notre Dame's got to get by Indiana. So that was just another prevailing thought I had, kind of looking at the results of last night. But, kind of shifting the conversation this way again, Mike, how about the college football playoff really leaning into Notre Dame, kicking this thing off, the first ever 12-team playoff?
It's going to be Tim Hyde. I will give credit for Tim because he had been calling it. And then I was like, I totally agree with you. But, like, we've been saying Friday night forever. Like, we just felt like this is what this committee is going to do. They want Notre Dame on a Friday night. Now, kudos to them for having it, not be Alabama. They don't deserve to be in, as much as I wanted Notre Dame to face Alabama in the first round. I just feel like, man, you're getting a home game in December. I want it against an SEC team, but, that's fine. You brought up the point, right, Kyle? You said something about like the path being the most desirable, right? That's what you just kind of made that
Yeah,
comment.
the 5 and the 6 seed have the most
It's just
desirable path.
the most desirable path should be the 1 and the 2, and then the 3 and the 4. I mean, I guess you get the bye, which is the desired thing, but you don't get rewarded, I guess, a whole lot. And I don't know, man. But
Well, I'm saying the most desirable path, for the 4 teams that don't have an automatic bye. So the 5 through 8, it is the 5 and 6 seed, at least this year.
And it's a Friday, obviously Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern time, ESPN, ABC. Guys, when is the last time that ESPN had a home game inside Notre Dame Stadium?
It's got to be. I mean, when did the NBC contract start? The 90s?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Late
80s, early 90s.
I mean,
Well,
I'll let
when
the
the
chat tell
NBC
me. We got
contract
folks a lot. We have folks
Yeah.
that are probably our combined age together that are in here. So
First of all, I love the Friday night kickoff. Like that.
I love it.
That is going to be awesome.
It's gonna be incredible.
Like even as a writer who constantly yearns for noon kicks, like that Friday night is going to be an electric atmosphere. Maybe there's snow on the ground. It's an in-state matchup. I know, Mike, you were saying Indiana might not be the biggest brand, but A, it's a really good football team, and B, and you got it. I mean, it's not the biggest football brand, but it's a big national college brand. And it's a big fan base. There should be plenty of visiting fans there, which I know is not the greatest news for Notre Dame fans, but should be an electric atmosphere. And I think the ESPN or the powers that be made the right choice by putting this Friday night.
So Kyle, I'm sorry, Jack, just as the college football fan you are, like, tell us about Indiana, like what you've observed from them this season, like what makes them a good team. I mean, obviously the quarterback has had a good year.
So the quarterback, Curtis Work, has had a good year. He's a big dude. They have a really good wide receiver 1. I'm not gonna remember his name. If someone wants to look that up real quick,
Elijah Surratt.
Yeah, Surratt is a really good wide receiver. Justice Ellison is a physical. He's Notre Dame should ask Sam Hartman about him because he was his running back at Wake Forest. Physical dude. They run a very creative offense. You see some of their highlights. It's very well designed. They execute well. Their defensive line is really good. Kamara, his first name starts with an M. I'm not gonna remember it. But Kamara, their edge rusher, one of the best edge rushers in the country. I think he last time I checked, he led the country in pressures by an edge rusher. So good run game, creative scheme, quarterback who can operate it well, really good defensive line. And so what I observed in the Ohio State game, why they kind of got blown out, Indiana marched down the field the first drive of the game. It looked like, okay, they can really compete here. Ohio State made the adjustment. They can we cuss on here?
Sure.
They blitzed the ever living shit out of Indiana. Like every passing down, they would be sending disguised rushers off the edge. Indiana couldn't adjust to pick them up, and Rourke got lit up. So that obviously plays into Notre Dame's hands, a team that blitzes a ton. So one would think Indiana would come out with a better plan for that. But if I'm Notre Dame, I'm saying this is what Ohio State did that worked. We're going to do this until Indiana shows they can adjust.
I want to get your guys' thoughts on Penn State getting the look. I'm done with the ranking side of it. Let's just go to the seeding. Obviously, them putting Penn State over Ohio State. I mean, Penn State getting the 6 seed, Ohio State the 8. Did you guys agree with that decision? Like, do you think? I mean, Ohio State had the head-to-head. They had the same amount of losses. Do you guys think it should have been? I'll go to you, Kyle. Do you think it should have been Penn State over Ohio State?
Well, if we're sticking with a theme that, they are not going to punish you for playing in a conference championship game, I think so. It was funny last night when I was in bed at 1:30 a.m. It was just Jack and I on the Loose Emoji message board talking about the rankings in the thread. I was typing up my rankings, and my first projection that I gave, I had Ohio State ahead of Penn State for that reason, because they won that head-to-head matchup. But then, as I said at the start of the show, I just kept leaning into what Ward Manuel said on ESPN on Tuesday, that he's not going to punish a team for not, they're not going to change the rankings for teams that didn't play. So they still had Penn State ahead of Ohio State in last week's rankings. So I just keep going back to that. They're, once again, they're not punishing you for playing on a conference championship game. So I think that, I was not ultimately surprised that they kept Penn State over Ohio State for that reason.
I thought that. Sorry, Jack, let me go real quick, and then we'll go. I'm not surprised by it either. I thought that's what they're going to do. But then you look at Clemson and SMU. And by the way, folks watching on YouTube, you have the times and everything. We'll talk about that in a second. But Clemson has one more loss than SMU, but they still put SMU in the 11 and Clemson at 12, which I find interesting.
They don't care about that conference championship.
They really don't.
Which
Jack,
is funny. One more thought real quick, Jack, which is funny because when I gave my projections, like I kept that theme for the start of them, but then when I was deciding between where Clemson and SMU would be ranked, I was like, oh, well, Clemson won the head-to-head last night. Well, apparently that doesn't matter in these rankings.
So whatever you would have thought about Notre Dame and Penn State before this game, and I was personally of the belief that Notre Dame passed the eye test much more than Penn State did and was the better team. That being said, if you thought before Oregon Penn State that Penn State was above Notre Dame, as the committees did publicly, I don't think you can drop Penn State below Notre Dame after that game, because Penn State proved like they can compete and they can run with, like, all the questions about Penn State were about the offense. They ran with Oregon for a good 55 minutes of that game. They consistently ran the ball. Oregon couldn't do anything to stop the run. And Oregon's offense is just crazy hard to stop. They do so many things well. But you got the run game with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. Drew Aller made some gutsy, really good throws. He looked better than I've seen him before. Like, Penn State really showed me something against Oregon, and I don't blame the committee for not dropping them below Notre Dame.
So obviously Notre Dame getting the first game of the playoffs December 20th, 8 p.m. Eastern time in South Bend again. NBC Notre Dame contract started in 1991, so it has been before the three of us were born that ESPN has hosted a home Notre Dame playoff game or broadcasted it. And then the next afternoon and I love these first round games being at the home site. Like, that is incredible. Penn State, SMU again on the 21st at noon on TNT and Max. Have you guys watched a college football game on TNT before?
No, but I'm excited because TNT is a much better production than ESPN.
4 p.m. Texas hosting Clemson, and then the nightcap Ohio State hosting Tennessee. So you got TNT at noon, TNT at 4, and then back to ESPN at 8. And then if Notre Dame beats Indiana January 1st, 8:45, so the nightcap, Notre Dame would play against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, which is much better than the Peach Bowl, right? So you're playing in New Orleans rather than Atlanta, which is so those Georgia fans are going to travel, but Athens to Atlanta, made the drive many times. It's like 90 minutes, maybe it's 2 hours with bad traffic. This is a little bit better for Notre Dame going to the Sugar Bowl rather than the Peach. Jack, you had something?
No, I was gonna say, like, I'm surprised. I noticed the Sugar Bowl thing, and I'm surprised because my impression was that the teams got to pick where they go in order. Like, Oregon obviously would choose the Rose Bowl. Would have thought Georgia would choose the Peach Bowl, given that it's when they play there and they play there a lot. It's basically a home game for them. Tyler Herco was at the game last night at that same stadium where the Peach Bowl is played, and the Peach Bowl was, from his impression, was like 95% Georgia fans. So
Jack,
Sugar Bowl.
Quick clarification on this, that Andy and Ari mentioned this last night on the show. I don't know the exact details, but I think that for the next 2 years, the Sugar Bowl has some sort of rights where they get the SEC in one of those games in the Sugar Bowl game. So that's why Georgia's playing it, is my understanding. So
That is interesting.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how, them, picking where they want to play and all that factors in, but I remember from what they mentioned last night, it sounds like whoever the SEC team is has to play in the Sugar. So
folks, please hit the thumbs up on this video. Subscribe to the Blue and Gold YouTube channel for more content. We will be live Tuesday, unless Tim or Goolsby blow me up about Monday. I'll be live with Tim Tuesday, and then I'm sure I will do a show with Goolsby. But Goolsby's not like I want to do a live reaction to this kind of thing. Goolsby will want to watch Indiana. Tim will want to watch Indiana. So trust me, guys, we have a lot of time, 12 days before Notre Dame and Indiana. So we will get those guys on here, this Blue and Gold YouTube channel, to preview this game. I have a few more topics for today's show. One being a little bit of a rant. I don't get into March Madness as much now than I did when I was, in my teens and several years ago, just because I just don't have enough time. I have enough hobbies. I don't really getting into March Madness. But I remember watching March Madness, the bracketology. I love bracketology, if you guys haven't noticed. And Jay Billis just yelling at the committee for the 69th best team to not get in. It's like, okay, brother, if you wanted to get in, maybe win all your games. Okay. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. If you are a Notre Dame, no, let's not start with Notre Dame. If you're an Ohio State fan and you're upset that you're in the 8th seed and Penn State is in the 6th, you know what? Don't lose to a bad Michigan team at home. If you're Penn State and you wish you would have been in the 6 over the 5, I don't know, beat Ohio State at home or beat Oregon. You have all these, everyone had the opportunity to get one of those buys or to be ranked higher. Notre Dame, Irish fans, listen, I've said this, I've given this example many, many times. So for all our avid listeners, I apologize. Sorry, not sorry. If you wanted to be in the 5, right, you think Notre Dame is better than Penn State, they should at least be in the 6. Don't lose to NIU. You have the worst loss of all these teams by far. Don't lose to NIU. You don't lose to NIU, you're the 5. You're the 5, and you're the number 2 team in the country if you just don't lose to NIU. So Irish fans, think back to September 7th. If I would have told you, hey, Notre Dame's going to win out and be in the 7 seed and host Indiana, you would have jumped for joy. You would have done cartwheels, many other things. You would have been fired up. So if you're one of those Notre Dame fans who's just so pissed that you're not above Penn State and you're not above Texas, just remember September 7th and just say, man, yeah, I mean, you're hosting a playoff game. Beggars can't be choosers. You would have begged to just be in the field, and now you're hosting Indiana. Jack, thoughts on that? Any disagreements?
No, I agree. I think that goes for Notre Dame with NIU. That goes for Ohio State with Michigan. That goes for Alabama for all the people complaining. The most ridiculous thing I see on Twitter today is if Alabama gets left out, no one's going to schedule good non-conference games. Alabama didn't get left out because they scheduled good non-conference games. They lost in their own conference to Vanderbilt and to a terrible Oklahoma team. Drew Pine's signature win was over Oklahoma. Drew Pine outplayed Oklahoma's starting quarterback in that game. Oklahoma is a terrible team, and they blew out Alabama. Alabama looked awful in that game. If they would have liked to make it over SMU, they shouldn't have looked that bad against Oklahoma. Everyone had their chance, and I don't have major disagreements with how the committee sorted it out.
Kyle?
Listened to Andy and Ari last night, and I think Andy Staples.
I should just get Andy and Ari on the show, Kyle. Why do I? I'm just teasing you.
They're the GOAT, man. They're the best show in college sports right now. And I was tuned in last night, and Andy kept making the point, Andy Staples, that Northern Illinois' loss counts as 2 for Notre Dame. That's
at least 1.5.
That's a 2-loss blemish on their schedule, and I think that's how the committee viewed it as well. with the way they ranked Penn State and Texas ahead of Notre Dame.
Jack, any thoughts on that? You agree?
No, I don't disagree.
Yeah.
I think again, like we talked about this morning, like no one besides Oregon has a perfect resume. We talk about Georgia as being a tough second round matchup, and they certainly have a high ceiling. They have the most and highest quality wins of any team in college football, but they've also showed some real flaws. They have showed that their wide receivers and skill position guys, playmakers, are not elite. Their quarterback has major question marks, whether Carson Beck is healthy or not. And their defense has been more vulnerable than it's been in the past. And with all that in mind, they were very rightly the 2 seed. So everyone has flaws in this field.
Yeah, even Tennessee, right? If Tennessee's upset, don't lose to Arkansas, right? Like we can keep on with this exercise. The whole Notre, I don't think they treated NIU as 2 losses. I think it was like a 1.5, because otherwise Notre Dame, they would have had Ohio State and Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee had, I just closed their schedule. Tennessee beat Bama. They beat Oklahoma. They beat NC State. They beat Florida, which is actually a decent one. Like Tennessee, if you're looking at NIU as 2 losses, then Tennessee had a better resume than Notre Dame and Ohio State too. So I don't agree with that personally. But a few other things that I wanted to get to. Is this the best season? Like, is this at least that the 3 of us have been following college ball? Is this the best season ever? Like, for the flaws of the 12-team playoff, were you guys dialed in to Boise and UNLV like you were on Friday night, like in years past? Probably not. Like some of you big college football junkies who just love it, yes. But for all of us, like that game had so much more significance. Like, did you ever really care about the Mountain West Championship game until this year? This season has been incredible, Jack.
No, certainly not as much as this year. And so, Mike, going back to your point about how the auto buy system should be changed. Like, I agree with that, but I love the auto bids. I think I am so stoked that Boise State and Arizona State are getting a chance to show what they can do in the playoff. I think Arizona State has one of the most electric players in the country in Cam Skattebo, and is arguably the hottest team in college football. They're up there with Notre Dame and Oregon, who hasn't lost in that regard. They have 1 loss since September, and it was without their starting quarterback. I think they should totally have a shot, even though they don't play in the SEC or the Big Ten. Boise State, obviously, we all know about them with Ashton Genty. Like, a lot of games mattered. Like everyone with the 12-team system, everyone was like, well, the regular season games won't matter anymore. That totally didn't happen. We had an amazing championship Saturday yesterday, and more regular season games mattered to more people.
Yeah.
I think that the system is a massive upgrade, and we got one of the best seasons in college football.
I agree. More games mattered, but losses did mean a little bit less. Like Clemson, sure. Like you lose to South Carolina, you get a little help, and now you're having a bye. It's crazy. Kyle, do you agree? Best season ever?
I lean towards saying yes. Yeah, because I initially thought that the 12-team playoff was going to devalue the regular season, but I think it was the opposite. I mean, the SEC just, as Jack knows, as a fellow Mizzou fan, well, I'm not a Mizzou fan, but as a Mizzou fan, that the SEC just ate each other alive, and that now we're looking at Alabama not being in the playoff. So, Mike, I got to do it. I'm sorry, I've been wanting to share my screen forever.
Yeah, go ahead.
The forecast for Friday night in South Bend on December 20th.
Sorry, Kyle.
We are a ways away.
Oh, awesome.
24.
But this is what we're going to look at. About 30 degrees. How about that wind, Jack? Are you concerned about the kickers? I mean,
Well, I was concerned about the kickers anyway, but yeah.
I don't think that wind's going to help it at all. I think as a golfer here, anytime you get around that 10 to 15 mile per hour range, starts to get a little dicey. I know the football is a little bit here, but we are going to see some wind in the forecast about a dozen days out. But everyone's going to get their wish because it's going to look like it's going to be a cold December night in South Bend on the 20th.
With that in mind, if it is 4th and 1 in Indiana territory, Notre Dame should not be kicking the ball at all, no matter the situation.
Just real quick, guys. I don't know if Notre Dame wants us to put out all of the Freeman presser dates, but Freeman will be talking to the media today at 4 Eastern. So it'll be interesting to hear what he has to say. I don't anticipate a whole lot to come from that other than he will be asked about injuries. So it'll be notable, right? Freeman's
we're allowed.
Wednesday at signing day, if we're allowed. I mean, I would anticipate in one way or another, Hansen or Berardino or, somebody will ask about the end. I mean, they just will. They just will. So they might not ask it directly, but those guys will ask. Someone's going to ask. So much subjectivity in college football rankings. Go back to computers. Do you guys like the committee or would you rather like the BCS formula come back?
I like the committee. I think they have a hard job, but I feel like in most years they have gotten it right from what I believe. And like last year was an unprecedented scenario. Florida State was obviously not the same team without Jordan Travis. Like they were going to get crucified no matter what they did. But I think in this year, I think they got it right. I think they got the field right. I would have put SMU in 2. And I don't know what the BCS would have said about that. I don't particularly care. I think humans.
BCS had Notre Dame in their would have based on BCS rankings, they would have had Notre Dame in the 5 seed for what it's worth. Kyle, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm pulling up that. Is this what you're referring to, Mike?
Yes.
So yeah,
this would have been they had Notre Dame over Penn State and Texas. I mean, they had Ohio State would have been so it would have been Notre Dame in the 5 seed, Ohio State in the 6, Texas 7, Penn State 8, Indiana 9. And they would have had Bama in.
Clemson.
Clemson would have been in based on their win, right? But yeah, it is interesting. Let's continue on here. Would you guys have rather, question from Dynasty, would we have rather played SMU or Indiana? Like, do you guys have a thought on this? Like, I think they're both really good teams. Like, to me, it's like, I don't know if this is a bad example, but if a toddler walked up to me and said, "Do you want to fight me?" and I beat him up. If I beat him up, okay, cool. You beat up a toddler. If you get beat up by the toddler, you're going to hear about that forever, right? I know this is not a perfect example or metaphor. Just bear with me, right? SMU or Indiana are good enough to beat you. But if you lose to SMU or Indiana, you're never going to hear the end of it. That's why I wanted Bama or Clemson right off. Just beat that big team right off the bat. But I digress. Jack, what do you think about this?
I think in terms of the easier matchup, like what would it be the more likely matchup for Notre Dame to win? Probably SMU because of the weather factor. Yeah. I know Tyler Horka will disagree because he's a cold denier, but it's not just you're not just playing in the cold for one day. Like if you're Notre Dame, you're practicing in the cold, you're living in the cold, you're walking to class in the cold every day. Indiana's doing that too. SMU is not. It makes a difference. I don't care what anyone says. It makes a difference on game day. So I think SMU would be the easier matchup. I think the resumes are very similar, but in terms of like what's more interesting and exciting to me, I think the in-state battle with the big brand in Indiana is really cool.
Another thing that a commenter said is when I was kind of talking about, I went on my rant earlier about like just win your games. This guy said, who's Penn State's good win though? I mean, like when you look at Penn State, we've talked about this a lot with Tim Hyde, like Penn State, it's a matter of valuing the wins and the losses. Like Penn State's 2 losses were against two playoff teams by a score, where you had, like, when you stack up these two teams, and I don't even see the top 25. Like, is Illinois a top 25 team, Jack? Do you know where like the final rankings ended up?
I'll look up the final rankings, but I want to say they were at the back end.
So, like, Penn State, I mean, like, in terms of wins, I feel like Penn State and Notre Dame, the resume is pretty similar. It's just the losses for Penn State, right? If the committee viewed a one loss, like a loss in the conference championship game to Oregon as not really meaning a whole lot, then you just compare losing to Ohio State versus NIU, and I think that's why Penn State's ranked ahead of Notre Dame. I think it's that simple. Illinois is at 20. They just announced it. They said so. It's like, what's Notre Dame's ranked win right now? Like, is Army?
Army
So,
might Army.
They have to be right.
They'll
They
be
just
ranked.
smacked
Playing in
Tulane.
the American Championship.
Yeah, they just smacked Tulane. So it's like, I feel like the resumes, like who you beat, is pretty equal. Now you can go with the eye test and all that stuff, and I think Notre Dame is the better football team. Don't get me wrong, but I don't have a problem with what the committee did. Do you, like, in terms of like the entire bracket, like, do you guys have any big issues with this? Like, man, I really feel like this team should have been over this team or anything.
The only one that I question is Clemson SMU, just because Clemson beat SMU outright, but I don't really have a strong stance on that. I mean, that's, not, no big deal.
Yeah. Jack?
Yeah, Kyle's right that I probably would have leaned towards putting Clemson over SMU just because of head-to-head, and the committee's shown that they value head-to-head. But yeah, I think they got the 12 teams right, and that's what matters most.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they did as well. Miami didn't deserve to be in here at all, and Bama did not either. So I think at the end of it was actually a pretty easy, like, decisions for the bracket for the committee. Now it's interesting. I've been saving a lot of projections, and it's gonna be fun to look back through all of those, like what everyone and their brother did, seeding projections after the championship games, to see who actually got some of these right. Because I mean, I thought right away we would get Notre Dame, Indiana, but the rest of it, I didn't really know what the committee would do. But I don't like, if you're a Notre Dame fan, sure, you would have liked to see the Irish in the 5 or the 6, but it was really just how you view the conference championship losses, right? We've been talking about this on the Loose Emoji board for the past 24 hours. Like, a loss is a loss, and you should get really penalized for it, or do you not, because it's a conference championship game and you lost by a score to a really good team? It's just how you view it. So it is what it is. Boys, any other thoughts before you wrap up here? I'll be looking at the chat to see if anything else pops up, but maybe some early thoughts on Notre Dame, Indiana, how you guys see that game playing out.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up, Mike, because I have just kind of a brief look here, some of the statistics for Indiana, what we're looking at, the type of team that's coming to South Bend. Things that stick out to me: number 2 team in scoring total defense, number 2 team in scoring offense. And I know they have a pretty good scoring defense as well. So number 6. And going back to the conversation about, would you rather play SMU or Indiana? I probably lean toward SMU just because, I'm with Horka. I think the weather factor is overrated. But I just think there's going to be, if Indiana's going to have more invested in this game, like just slightly more, just because of the in-state matchup. I think there's more of a rivalry component between Notre Dame and Indiana. I think it's slight, but that's the way I kind of see it. But I mean, just looking at the stats, Indiana's a pretty darn good football team. This is going to be a good football team that's coming into South Bend on the 20th.
I'm very much looking forward to diving into some Indiana tape after we get off here later this afternoon. I'll be publishing like a 3 initial thoughts on the matchup shortly. Hopefully before we talk to Mark Freeman at 4:00, and it's going to be an absolutely electric environment. A night game, like Marcus Freeman said himself, like night games at Notre Dame Stadium are better. And it's just not close. Like even against an atrocious Florida State team, that place was rocking. Saturday night, it was really cool to be at. And Friday Night Lights, you really just cannot beat it. And I'm really excited for December 20th.
Yeah, so Notre Dame, December 20th. Irish open as an 8.5-point favorite. There's been a lot of discussion in the chat about how much red there will be. Justin ND Troll Sniper says it won't be 40%.
No.
And then Tom says, I would bet my life savings it won't be 40%. Doug says it's gonna be 40%. So I don't know. 40 is insane. I don't know how the tickets get dispersed for this. But if you're a Notre Dame fan and you have a ticket, you do not sell your ticket, bro. Go to the game. Or give it to a Notre Dame fan. Sell it to a Notre Dame fan. So,
Mike, I got one more thought to close this thing out. Who wins this championship? It is wide open. Does it not feel wide open?
Yeah.
I have said for a while that Oregon is the most complete team. And again, I'm biased because my brother's a student there. But I have said for a while that Oregon is the most complete team, and until someone like I'll have to watch Oregon, Wisconsin again, because Wisconsin's the only team that's really come close to stopping Oregon's offense. But that was also without Tez Johnson, and with Tez Johnson on that team, there's no weaknesses in that offense. So the favorite is Oregon until proven otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at this, who are the teams that we believe could win the championship? Oregon, Georgia. I don't see Arizona State or Boise. Texas, Texas. Yeah, you can see.
They figure out their offense.
If they figure out their offense, Texas resume is. All right, let me just look this up real quick so I can pull it up. Texas, their most marquee win is losing to Georgia, like in the SEC championship game. Like Texas doesn't have a great. At A&M, 17-7.
Yeah, they have the same marquee win as Notre Dame.
It's not. That's why I keep going back to Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame. Flip a coin. Like I could have been fine. Any of those 5, 6, 7 between those 3 teams, I would have personally been fine with just looking at the resumes. I guess we'll say Texas, that you could see them winning it, but I'm not saying that very confidently. Penn State, no. Just no. Notre Dame, biased, but yes, I think that Notre Dame's defense and the playmakers on offense, they could win a championship. Ohio State, I would throw in there, and Tennessee probably not, and then no for Clemson or Penn or SMU. So that's me. I think Oregon, Georgia, Texas, Notre Dame, and Ohio State are the teams that could potentially win this thing. Obviously they all could potentially win it, but for me, those are the teams that I could see winning it. Do you guys agree or no?
Kyle, you
can you pop up the bracket that ESPN has, because I want to see the way how some of the paths are shaping up. You had that ESPN bracket pulled up earlier in the show, yes. So I'm just gonna look in here. So Texas, if they beat Arizona State, I'm looking here, Penn State. I think Notre Dame and Penn State have the easiest path to the championship.
Yeah, I just don't think Penn State can win a big game. James Franklin has shown consistently he can't do it.
Are we going to see a Georgia and Oregon championship game?
I would probably. I know it's basic, but I would probably pick Georgia and Oregon. But we'll see. I think Notre Dame can beat Georgia. I agree with you, Mike, that Texas can win, but
especially with that path, right?
Especially with the path. But I need to see a lot more from Quinn Ewers, because he was very unimpressive last night.
Yeah, and then Ohio State, like if Ohio State beats Tennessee and then you beat Oregon, like okay, now they're cooking, right? So maybe even throw Tennessee for that same reason. Like you get past Oregon, then that team is going to be hot, confident, dangerous for sure.
This might be a hot take, but I think Tennessee has a really good shot to beat Ohio State and Columbus. I have not been impressed with Ohio State this year. Like someone, it might have been David Ubben with the Athletic, but someone said like Ohio State's probably the most talented team in the country, and not once have they looked like it this year.
I am going back, boys, to no one is like so many of these teams just unimpressive. Tennessee, they've looked impressive, but they also have a loss to Arkansas, and their marquee win again is like blowing out NC State or Oklahoma on the road or Georgia or Florida in overtime. Kentucky, they beat Kentucky. Woo! So just a lot of unimpressive outside of a couple teams for me, as I talked about earlier. But and yeah, Goshen Gamer just said Georgia doesn't scare me. Like Oregon to me is the one. And I think Goolsby's talked about this too. Oregon's the only team where it's like, oh man, Georgia may be more on name brand than anything. I mean, Georgia's offense, brother. Oof.
Yeah.
And we don't even know what their quarterback situation is going to be like. So
the issue again is like I don't know how you stop Oregon because they run the ball extremely well. They pass the ball extremely well. They have an extremely creative scheme that they execute really, really well. Like they got playmakers for days. Tez Johnson, the wide receiver, like familiarize yourself with him because he's electric. Ferguson, the tight end, is one of the best tight ends in the country. They have a really physical running game, kind of multifaceted like Notre Dame's is. They don't have the breakaway effect, but they'll run you over. Dylan Gabriel is not an NFL quarterback, but he's going to make the right reads and he's really good operating in that system. So, and also like you want to question Dylan Gabriel, like who in college football besides Cam Ward has been better? Like quarterback play is really down in college football this year.
yeah.
So like who has the best quarterback in this field? I would probably argue Oregon.
Yeah. All right, boys. Well, I think we're going to end it there. If you have not done so, everyone, please hit the thumbs up on this video. Of course, subscribe to the Blue and Gold YouTube channel if you are new here. Tons of coverage leading up to Notre Dame in the college football playoff. What a fun time to be a Fighting Irish fan. Signing day, the playoff, 12 days away. And we'll definitely have you covered with everything here at Blue and Gold. Jack, did I say something to make you chuckle?
No, I'm just like really excited because it's a fun
time. I didn't know if I slipped up in
Fighting Irish Writer. No,
sometimes I slip up and say dumb things, so I didn't know if I did one of those. Like Tim Hyde has some sus moments on here, boys, and I laugh all the time. And I text my friends, I'm saying, hour and 12 minutes. Send me the clip of what Tim said because it's so funny. I love you, Tim, if you're still watching. Okay, that is going to do it for us. Appreciate you guys for watching. Head over to blueandgold.com for so much content. Like Jack said, you were going to do three thoughts on the matchup initially. We've got a ton of content already up. Signing day coverage if you miss any of that. And I'm sure Tyler's going to be writing Jack. And then, yeah, tons of discussion on the loose emoji message board. Thousands of Notre Dame fans. Tickets are already over $1,100 on StubHub. So again, if you're a Notre Dame fan and you maybe don't have a ton of Irish fans in your family, you're alone there, and you want that Notre Dame community outside of YouTube chats, blueandgold.com is definitely the place to be. Appreciate everyone for watching, and as always, we will catch you next time. Tim Hyde.